with the Hornets, a young team with a lot of skill and a lot of young guys who just need to figure out how to play their role. You look at guys like James Bouknight, who every time he was in the G League, he dropped 30-plus points, but couldn't find a way to get on the court on the Hornets. You look at P.J. Washington, who has played like 4 different roles in the last 2 years. You look at guys like Kai Jones, JT Thor, who showed a lot of good flashes last year. And then on top of that, they have the 13th and the 15th pick. You have Terry Rozier still on roster. And then, of course, you have LaMelo Ball. And potentially Gordon Hayward coming back. Like you have a very, very skilled team. You have some decent vets in Rozier and Hayward. You have the ability to make a lot of good roster moves. And then you have one of the best young all-stars in the league and potentially one of the best young players moving forward in LaMelo Ball. You need to kind of make sure that they have the right coaching at the beginning of their career and a bit of stability. James Borrego tried to instill a culture with the Hornets, and I think at some point, the coach and the players and the personnel on the team need to be in alignment there. And I think, like you said, there's a lot of flash on the Hornets, both in terms of how they play and then also in personality. And I think that kind of clashes with the kind of coach James Borrego was. And then you see stuff like Mitch Kupchak coming out and saying, oh, I loved Bouknight. I loved Kai Jones. I wish they would have gone on the court more, but it was a coaching decision. And that's where you kind of see maybe that's why Borrego got fired. This kind of like grind it out to earn your spot culture he wanted to build in Charlotte. You saw what he did with LaMelo his rookie year. You have the number 3 pick, and you make him come off the bench the first half of the year and earn his spot in the starting lineup. You make James Bouknight go to the G League. Whether or not you think he deserved to play, you have a guy as talented as him who you were able to pick in the top 10. A guy who was projected to go 6th the week of the draft last year. You were able to pick him, and you don't play him the first 2 months of the season. You don't play him a minute the first 2 months of the season. It's things like that where you lose the players' trust, and when you're a team like the Hornets who aren't competing for much other than the ability to make the playoffs, you want to be able to let your young guys play through their weaknesses and play through their struggles. And I don't think that really happened. I don't think that's something that Borrego really allowed. And so Kenny Atkinson allows these things to happen. D'Lo in that year that he went off also averaged like 4.5 turnovers. But if you were to pull D'Lo every time he had a bad turnover, that team wouldn't have made the playoffs. And so I think the trust that Kenny Atkinson has in his young guys to improve, as well as show their abilities, and him being able to put them in roles to succeed is huge. And I think that's going to come into big play with the Hornets. Now, moving on to the Miles Bridges situation, first of all, I think it's a bit unrealistic to think that Michael Jordan is going to open up his wallet for a team that's not going to win. And kind of like what we talked about with the Hornets, you're going to tie yourself in. You're already tied into Terry Rozier for 5 more years. That's a contract that I think once you get that cap spike going on and $20 million doesn't look like $20 million anymore. Yeah, it's movable, but until then, it's not very movable. Gordon Hayward's contract similarly goes on for another 3 years. It is not movable. That's not a movable contract.
That's very tough,
especially with Gordon Hayward playing 30 games in the last 2 years. It's
never on the court.
Yeah, so that's something that's even harder. And then you have to pay LaMelo, and LaMelo is going to get a super max because he's already an all-star level player and very likely could make an all-NBA team in the next couple of years.
Yep.
Do you pay Miles Bridges, who just had the best season of his career, but it was 18-8 on decent percentages? He started off the year very hot, regressed quite a bit as the year went on. And, again, if you're Michael Jordan, are you willing to pay for a team that likely won't be competing at the highest level the way it's currently constructed? I think you need to make some moves if you want to sign Miles Bridges. I think the best idea might be to sign and trade him this offseason when his value's at the highest. You can potentially restart a contract, get a rookie who you might really like, or you can get a couple pieces to put around LaMelo who might be better this season and open up cap space in 2023, 2024 when that Gordon Hayward contract's up, and be able to sign a running mate for LaMelo Ball then. I don't think Miles Bridges is that running mate long term. LaMelo Ball, the way he plays, I think you need a guy who's going to be able to go out there and get his own bucket at times. And Miles Bridges right now is not that. And banking on him to become that is
risky.
Yeah. And so if I were the Hornets and Michael Jordan, I probably would not be signing Miles Bridges to that extent, to the $25 million or whatever he may be asking for. Maybe look at the sign and trade market, because there are teams who are going to want him, especially as just kind of like a cog in the machine type player. He's a very good high energy player for a team that needs like a fourth option on the floor. But I don't think he's a second option, and that's the way you're going to be paying him if you're the Hornets, especially the way you're constructed.
Right.
It's they're in a very tough position too, but LaMelo's 21 years old. You have a couple years with him. I don't think they're super concerned about winning at the moment. I think it's great if you win. But I think you try and build a good team around LaMelo. If you're able to afford keeping Miles Bridges, I think that's great. Probably good for your culture there. I think they're a very tight-knit group. But, you don't want to be paying the luxury tax to make the 9 seed.
I feel that. That's definitely not what you want to have hanging over your head. Is a huge check you got to write when you,
especially if you're probably going to be forcing yourself into paying the repeater tax because none of your contracts are movable.